Welcome to RoboCast, the show where we dive headfirst into all this crazy stuff going on in tech and culture. We're going deep on Elon Musk.
Elon Musk.
Yeah, that Elon Musk.
Right.
We all know him, the Tesla and SpaceX guy,
Mhm.
the one who turned Twitter into X.
Yeah.
Remember back in the day when he was like the poster child for innovation,
Yeah.
fighting climate change, shooting rockets into space. Had that whole humanity's savior kind of vibe.
It's fascinating how much his public image has shifted. I mean, before 2020, he was largely seen as this, forward-thinking, almost utopian figure.
Right. But then things took a turn.
Yeah.
Over the past few years, we've seen this, well, pretty dramatic shift to the right, politically speaking.
For sure.
And frankly, it's left a lot of people scratching their heads.
Yeah, it's certainly been a perplexing evolution.
Totally. And to understand what's going on, we have to go, beneath the surface. Past the tweets and headlines, we're diving into a deeply personal aspect of Musk's life, his relationship with his transgender daughter, Vivian Jenna Wilson.
This isn't just a celebrity family feud. Vivian has publicly criticized Musk's parenting and his stance on transgender issues, which has turned into a very public and very complicated situation.
Exactly. And what makes this even more intriguing is how this personal conflict seems intertwined with his political activities, especially surrounding the 2024 election. It's about to get really interesting.
It's a story with a lot of layers, and I think it's important to start with Vivian's perspective. Her first ever interview, which she gave to NBC News back in July, is really where we begin to understand the depth of this situation.
Yeah, you're right. That interview is powerful. Vivian doesn't hold back. She describes Musk as this distant figure, cold, quick to anger, and consumed by his own image. It's a far cry from the future-focused innovator we saw in the public eye.
She even shares some pretty specific anecdotes that paint a disturbing picture of their relationship. For instance, there's this story about when Vivian was just a kid on a road trip with Musk, he apparently berated her for having a high voice.
Wow.
Imagine being a fourth grader and getting yelled at by your dad for something like that.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it makes you question the kind of pressure and scrutiny she must have faced growing up.
Absolutely. And it provides context for her coming out as gay in 8th grade and then as transgender at 16.
Right.
It's worth noting that while her mother was fully supportive, Vivian claims Musk initially resisted her desire to seek medical treatment.
Yeah, and this detail is important because back then in California, both parents had to consent to medical treatment for a minor. So this legal hurdle adds another layer of complexity to their already strained relationship.
Definitely. And ultimately, this seems to be a pivotal point for Vivian. In 2022, she took the step of legally changing her name and severing ties with Musk, stating she no longer wished to be related to him in any way, shape, or form.
That's a powerful statement. And to make things even more intense, Musk publicly responded, referring to Vivian as his dead son and claiming she was killed by the woke mind virus during an interview with Jordan Peterson.
I was told, Xavier might commit suicide if he did.
That was a lie right from the outset.
Incredibly evil. And I agree with you that people that have been promoting this should go to prison.
That's
so I
personal
was tricked into doing this. They call it dead naming for a reason.
Yeah,
All right. So the reason it's called dead naming is because your son is dead. So my son Xavier is dead, killed by the woke mind virus.
That language is incredibly concerning. Using phrases like woke mind virus is a classic tactic we see in radicalization. It simplifies complex issues into this black and white good versus evil narrative,
Right.
which can be very dangerous.
So he's using these buzzwords to demonize an entire group of people and justify his own pain and anger.
It's crucial to understand that these terms are often intentionally vague, allowing them to be easily weaponized and interpreted in different ways. For Musk, wokeness seems to encompass anything that challenges his worldview, including transgender acceptance.
Right. It's like he's found this catch-all phrase to explain away anything he doesn't like or understand.
And that's where we start to see this personal conflict bleed into the political arena. Musk's narrative about wokeness and the trans agenda becomes central to his political activities, especially as he gets more involved in the 2024 election.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and delve into Elon's side of the story. We've got an article from The Guardian published in August, and as you mentioned, that Jordan Peterson interview.
Yeah.
In both men, he basically claims that Vivian's transition is the driving force behind his rightward shift and his mission to, and I quote, destroy the woke mind virus.
It's really striking what's in that Guardian article. A radicalization expert who chooses to remain anonymous suggests that Musk's reaction to Vivian's transition might have created a sort of cognitive opening for him to be influenced by extremist ideologies.
Oh, interesting. So it's like his personal pain and confusion made him more susceptible to these extreme viewpoints that offered a simplistic explanation for something that he couldn't comprehend.
It's a theory worth considering. The expert points out that radicalization often begins with a significant personal event that leaves an individual feeling vulnerable and searching for answers.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like he was grasping for an explanation, a reason why his childhood made the choices she had, and these harmful ideologies that scapegoat wokeness provided a convenient target for his anger and frustration.
Right. It's almost as if by blaming this external force, the woke mind virus, he could avoid grappling with the complexities of his own relationship with Vivian and the broader societal shifts happening around him.
So we see this incredibly personal and painful family drama playing out against the backdrop of Musk's growing political involvement. How exactly does this manifest in his actions on the political stage?
Well, one of the first moves he makes is founding a political action committee, America Pay, in July 2024.
Ah, yes, the Guardian article mentions this PAIC, which is supposedly focused on supporting meritocracy and individual freedom, but it seems to be primarily backing the Republican Party.
Right. And meritocracy, while sounding appealing on the surface, is often used to justify existing power structures and inequalities. It's the idea that those who succeed deserve their success, while those who struggle simply haven't worked hard enough, ignoring the systemic barriers and disadvantages that many people face.
So it's a convenient way to dismiss concerns about inequality and social justice by framing success as solely a product of individual effort.
Exactly. And it aligns with the GOP's general approach to social and economic issues, which tends to favor individual responsibility and limited government intervention.
Which makes sense, given that Musk is reportedly considering donating as much as $45 million a month to this PAC-ins. A pretty hefty sum of money, even for a billionaire.
It shows a serious commitment to influencing the political landscape. And then there's that $1 million a day voter sweepstakes he was running, which has faced legal challenges and concerns about potential election law violations.
Right, that whole sweepstakes thing was wild. According to the AP News article, it was specifically targeting voters in key battleground states like Pennsylvania, raising concerns about his motives and the legality of his tactics.
Absolutely. The sweepstakes was seen by many as a blatant attempt to influence the election outcome, especially given the legal challenges alleging that it violated Pennsylvania lottery laws and potentially even federal election law.
It seems like Musk was operating in this gray area, using his wealth and influence to push the boundaries of what's acceptable in terms of campaign finance and voter influence.
Remember that story about the ruler who's tricked into believing he's wearing magnificent clothes when in reality he's naked?
Yeah, I remember that one from childhood. What's the connection here?
Well, it makes you wonder if Musk, like the emperor, might be surrounded by people who are afraid to challenge his views, even when those views are harmful or based on misinformation.
So he's created this echo chamber around himself where dissenting voices are silenced or ignored, and he's only hearing what he wants to hear.
It's a possibility. We know that power dynamics can create these kinds of situations where people are reluctant to speak truth to power, even when it's necessary.
It's a chilling thought, the idea that someone with so much power could be operating within a bubble of their own making, shielded from reality and the potential consequences of their actions.
And this brings us to the role of X, formerly Twitter, in all of this.
Right, X has been in the news a lot lately, and not for good reasons.
Unfortunately, it's become a breeding ground for misinformation, particularly surrounding the election.
Right.
The Reuters article we have highlights how false and misleading claims about the election have been circulating widely on the platform.
And it's not just random users spreading this stuff. There's a report from the Center for Countering Digital Hate that states that at least 87 of Musk's own posts have promoted claims about the election that have been debunked by fact-checkers.
And those posts have garnered a staggering 2 billion views.
Wow.
Which is mind-boggling.
That's a massive amount of potential influence.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the network effects that allow X content to spread to other platforms like Reddit and Telegram.
Exactly. Even if you don't use X, you could still be encountering this misinformation through other channels. It's become incredibly difficult to contain.
Which is especially concerning given Musk's vocal support for Donald Trump, who has a long history of spreading election misinformation himself.
Absolutely.
Like a perfect storm of misinformation brewing.
It certainly raises serious questions about the potential consequences for our democracy when someone with Musk's reach and influence is actively promoting these falsehoods.
And speaking of consequences, I have some rather disheartening news to share. This past Tuesday, the GOP won the presidency, the House, and the Senate.
That is a significant development, and while it's impossible to definitively say how much of an impact Musk's activities had, it's hard to ignore the potential influence of his political involvement, his financial backing of the Republican Party, and the spread of misinformation on X.
It's a lot to unpack, and it's definitely a lot to process.
Yeah, it's hard not to feel overwhelmed by all of this, isn't it? The sheer scale of Musk's influence, the spread of misinformation, and now a political landscape that's, shaped in part by these events. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. I mean, just a few years ago, Musk was this tech icon, almost a folk hero for some. And now his actions have potentially contributed to like a major political shift in our country.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder of how individual choices, especially when amplified by wealth and platforms like X, can have ripple effects far beyond what we might initially imagine.
So let's bring this back to our listener. What does all of this really mean for their everyday life? How could this election outcome actually impact them?
That's the question we need to grapple with, right? It's easy to get caught up in the abstract, but these political shifts have very real consequences for people on the ground.
Exactly. So let's move past the headlines and talk about tangible impacts. What are some areas where we might see concrete changes based on this election?
Well, considering the GOP's platform and the influence of figures like Musk, we could see shifts in policies related to climate change, social justice, and even access to information itself.
Okay, so those are some pretty big areas. Can you give us some specific examples of what those changes might look like?
Sure. When it comes to climate change, the GOP has historically been less inclined towards environmental regulations and investing in renewable energy. So with a GOP-controlled government, we might see a rollback of existing environmental protections or a slowdown in the transition to clean energy sources.
That's pretty alarming considering the urgency of the climate crisis and this scientific consensus on the issue.
Yeah, and it's not just climate change. On the social justice front, we might see a pushback against LGBTQ plus rights, especially transgender rights.
Right.
This is particularly concerning given the rhetoric that has been circulating, fueled in part by Musk's own struggles with his daughter's transition.
Right. His constant references to the woke mind virus and his opposition to things like gender-affirming care for minors have definitely contributed to a climate of hostility towards the transgender community.
Absolutely. These ideas, which were once confined to fringe groups, are now being given a platform and legitimacy by figures like Musk. And that can have a real impact on the lives of transgender individuals and the broader LGBTQ plus community.
It's creating a climate of fear and intolerance, which is never a good thing.
Yeah, it's a step backwards for sure. And then there's the whole issue of access to information. With X playing such a significant role in the spread of misinformation, it's hard not to be concerned about the potential for further erosion of trust in reliable sources of information.
Especially considering that Musk controls the platform and has shown a willingness to promote certain narratives even if they've been debunked.
That's right. It creates this dangerous situation where it becomes harder and harder to distinguish fact from fiction, which can have serious consequences for our ability to make informed decisions as citizens.
It's like we're caught in this downward spiral where misinformation fuels distrust, which then makes people even more susceptible to misinformation.
It's a vicious cycle that we need to break out of.
So where do we go from here? Because it can feel pretty overwhelming.
I understand that feeling. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of these huge systemic issues, but I truly believe that even small actions can make a difference.
I hope so. I think we all need a little bit of hope right now. So give us some concrete examples.
Well, I think the first step is to simply acknowledge the problem. We need to recognize the very real threats posed by unchecked power, the spread of misinformation, and the erosion of democratic norms.
Yeah, awareness is key. You can't fight something if you don't even know it's there.
Right. Once we have that awareness, we can start taking action. And there are a number of things we can do, both individually and collectively.
Like what? Give us some examples.
On an individual level, we can all commit to being more critical consumers of information. Don't just blindly accept what you see on social media or hear from politicians. Do your own research, check sources, and be wary of information that seems designed to provoke strong emotions or confirm existing biases.
Yeah, it's about being more discerning, more skeptical, in a healthy way.
Exactly. We can also support organizations working to combat misinformation and promote media literacy. There are a lot of groups doing great work in this area, and they need our support now more than ever.
So donate our time, donate our money, spread awareness about these organizations, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And then there's collective action. We can engage in peaceful protest, contact our elected officials, and demand greater accountability from those in power. We have to make our voices heard, make it clear we won't tolerate the erosion of our democratic values.
It's about reclaiming our power as citizens and demanding a better future.
Exactly. It's a fight worth having, even when it feels overwhelming. Remember, change rarely happens overnight. It takes time, persistence, and a collective effort.
So don't lose hope. Don't give up. We're all in this together.
Absolutely. Every voice counts. Every action matters.
Okay, that does make me feel a little bit better. But there's still the issue of holding powerful figures like Elon Musk accountable. How do we do that when he seems to be operating with a sense of impunity?
That's a valid concern, and it's true that holding individuals like Musk accountable can be incredibly challenging, given their wealth, their influence and control over platforms like X.
But it can't be impossible, right? There has to be a way.
There are avenues we can explore. One approach is through legal channels. As we saw with the legal challenges to his voter sweepstakes, there are laws that can be used to hold even the most powerful individuals accountable for their actions.
So supporting organizations that are pursuing these legal challenges, staying informed about the cases, and making sure our elected officials know that we're concerned about these issues, those are good starting points.
Exactly. And then there's the court of public opinion. We can continue to call out Musk's harmful rhetoric, challenge his misinformation, and use our own platforms to amplify the voices of those who've been negatively impacted by his actions.
Social media can be a double-edged sword, but in this case, we can use it to shine a light on the truth and hold those in power accountable.
Absolutely. And we can choose to support businesses and organizations that align with our values, make conscious decisions about where you spend your money and who you support with your patronage.
Yeah. It's about voting with our wallets, making sure our economic choices reflect our values.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of accountability where powerful figures understand that their actions have consequences.
It's a long-term goal, but one worth striving for. You mentioned media literacy earlier. Can you talk a bit more about that? What does it mean to be media literate in today's world?
That's an excellent point. Media literacy is essentially the ability to critically analyze and evaluate the information we consume.
So it's not just reading or watching something, actively engaging with it on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's about asking questions like, who created this content? What is their purpose? What biases might they have? What information is missing?
It's like being a detective, looking
Yeah.
for clues and piecing together the bigger picture.
I like that analogy. It's a skill that's becoming increasingly essential in a world saturated with information, much of which is designed to mislead or manipulate.
So how do we become more media literate? What are some practical steps?
There are a lot of resources available online and through educational institutions. But even without formal training, there are things you can do in everyday life to become more discerning.
Such as?
Pay attention to the source. Is it a reputable news organization, a peer-reviewed journal, or a random person on social media? The source matters.
Right. And I imagine checking multiple sources is also important, right?
Yeah.
Don't just rely on one website or one news channel.
Absolutely. Look for information from a variety of sources, especially those with different perspectives. It'll give you a more well-rounded understanding.
Actively seeking diverse viewpoints, even ones you might not initially agree with.
Exactly. Also be wary of content designed to evoke strong emotions, fear, anger, outrage. Those emotions can cloud judgment and make us more susceptible to misinformation.
So take a step back, breathe, and approach the information with a more neutral mindset.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. If you're unsure about a source's credibility, do some digging.
Being curious, being skeptical in a healthy way, and not just passively accepting everything we see or hear. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about here. But before we move on, I want to loop back to Elon Musk and his relationship with his daughter, Vivian.
Yeah, it's a complex and sensitive topic, but one that's undeniably central to understanding Musk's trajectory and the forces at play in this election.
Yeah, for sure. And based on what we've learned about Vivian's story in Musk's own words, what do you think are some potential long-term impacts of this very public and very painful family conflict.
That's a tough question to answer definitively, especially since things are still unfolding.
On a personal level, it's clear this conflict has caused immense pain and division within the family. Vivian has been open about the emotional toll it's taken on her, and Musk has expressed his own pain and sense of loss.
It's just heartbreaking. It really underscores the human cost of these ideological battles that are playing out on such a public stage.
It's a stark reminder that these aren't just abstract debates. There are real people at the heart of these issues, with real emotions and real lives that are deeply affected.
It's easy to forget that when we're caught up in the news cycle and the political back and forth.
Exactly. And beyond the personal level, there are the broader societal implications to consider. Musk's public statements about his daughter and his use of inflammatory language like woke mind virus have contributed to a climate of hostility and intolerance towards transgender individuals and the LGBTQ plus community as a whole. It's almost like he's given permission for others to express those same bigoted views to legitimize hate speech and discrimination.
It's incredibly dangerous, and it can have a real chilling effect on the ability of transgender people to live openly and authentically.
It creates this sense of fear and uncertainty, like they have to constantly be on guard and worried about being targeted or harassed.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking reality for many transgender people, and it's something we need to actively push back against.
And then there's the impact on Musk's own legacy. His actions and statements have definitely tarnished his reputation among many who once saw him as a visionary leader and a force for progress.
It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the responsibility that comes with having a massive platform and influence.
It's a reminder that even those we admire can be flawed, and that power can be used for both good and ill.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that words have power and that the language we use matters.
Especially when you have a platform as large as Elon Musk's. Well, this has been a heavy but important conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, from Elon Musk's personal struggles and political activities to the spread of misinformation and the impact of the recent election. I think it's safe to say we're all feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now.
Yeah, it's understandable to feel that way. These are complex and challenging issues, and it's easy to feel a sense of despair or hopelessness.
Exactly. But I also think it's important to remember that we're not powerless. We've talked about some of the things we can do to fight back against misinformation, promote truth, and hold those in power accountable. It's not going to be easy, but it's a fight worth having.
I couldn't agree more. We all have a role to play in shaping the future we want to see, and even small actions can make a difference.
So let's not give up. Let's not lose hope. Let's keep pushing for a better world, one where truth and justice prevail. If you're looking for more thought-provoking content like this, be sure to subscribe to the Daniel David Allen YouTube channel. We've got a ton of great videos exploring a wide range of topics, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and let us know what you think.
We appreciate you listening.
Until next time,
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
this is RoboCast signing off.